So do you know Lex Fridman?
Yeah.
He does Joe Rogan. He's got his own podcast. He did a Bitcoin thing, I guess a week ago or something. And in one segment of it, he was saying that the Bitcoin community was closed off, and he just made the exemplary comment of like I'm a smart guy. I have a PhD. Like you can take the time to teach me. Apparently, that was clipped, and people had a laugh at his expense for saying that he had a PhD. Now, normally, what I do when these sorts of things happen is like try not to notice it. Number one, like be so uninvolved with Twitter and the YouTube comments that you have no idea that that's occurred. But if you do see it, immediately shut the computer and go do something else. And the way that he handled it, I thought was really interesting. He made a dedicated section of a video for 8 minutes where he said, I tried my best to be understood. This hurt my feelings that people were misunderstanding me. A lot of people have told me to toughen up about it, but I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I just want to tell everybody that I found this upsetting because I'm a fellow traveler on this path trying to learn and understand. And it was just at first I watched the video, I was like, you're doing this completely wrong, dude. Like, you have to not care. But then I did, by the end, really admire how he was so sincere in we talked about that you do this, but he did it on the internet, which I thought was crazy. Just being like, this hurt my feelings, and I'm really trying to connect with people, and I was upset that this was misinterpreted, and I hold no ill will towards you, but I wish you would stop. And it was disarming to see on the internet. I don't know if you have any reaction to it, but
no, I mean, I wonder why his seems sincere. Because
have you watched a lot of him?
No.
He is he doesn't immediately show it because I think he's Eastern Bloc and
when I see
yeah.
him, he is unexpressive.
No,
I've seen him interview people, and he's
all about
stoic.
heart, man. He's all about heart. Now he doesn't. I think his culture is not effusively expressive.
He's
in
not
that way.
facially expressive.
Yes, and he can seem monotone. When you listen to him for long enough, he's all about love and heart and connecting with people and being humble. So it's interesting to watch a guy that has that background, who is a little bit more flat, monotone, and stoic, but wear his heart on his sleeve and be hurt by internet comments and say so.
So what are the advantages and disadvantages of this strategy, though? Because I think you did something similar when you talked about the video that was about you. You're like, this hurt me. It's not, none of this is true. I'm not this person. I've been taken out of context. Well, and then in hindsight, you're like, this would have been better if I had just not even known that it existed.
What are the advantages? I think, well, the big thing is that, one, he made this specifically for his audience. I don't know what the advantages are. I guess it's just that's how he wants to treat it. He wants to treat people on the internet as the best versions of themselves. You know what I mean? And assume that if he shows vulnerability and kindness and heart and forgiveness, that will be returned. And I think in this particular case, it's likely to be.
Well, that's the weird thing about the internet is how many people listen to his podcast? 100,000 per episode?
A lot. It's more than that.
Okay.
He's
so
going fast.
99,950 of them might live up to the reputation he gives them. And 50 of them might go make a second round of memes. And the first time that he said he had a PhD, 99,990, like a vast majority might have gone, oh yeah, this makes total sense. In context, I understand. And only 50 out of 100,000, 200,000 people need to go, oh, I could clip this and make him look like a dick or whatever. And then you're going to see 50 memes, which is enough to, when presented to him, seem overwhelming. So it's weird because even if you do give people the best reputation, the internet's just so big, especially as your audience grows, there's going to be that small, tiny 0.001% of people that are going to meme you or write mean comments or whatever it is. So I don't think you can kill every person on the internet with kindness.
Well, what he essentially says at the end is that I am sensitive, and if I block you on Twitter, it's because I'm sensitive. And it's not because I hate you. It's not because I dislike you. It's because I can't handle that in my life. I'm sure that if we were in person, we could get some beers, get along, and hash out any differences we may have. I found that the fundamental, I think, difference between he and I is that he is attempting to use Twitter. And I laugh at this because to me, this is something I would never do, though I do respect it in him, to connect with people. And I would never, I would never think that that was a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, I look at that as so toxic, but clearly to him, it's brought value, and he is interacting in a way that is beyond what I'm capable of because I shut that entry point. You know, we respond mostly to Patreon questions and the most highly upvoted, thoughtful YouTube comments. So it's not that one is right or wrong. Mostly the thought that I had was how my own reaction to him transformed as I watched it, to going from, you're doing this wrong because you're not doing this the way that I would have handled this, would have been like, don't tell me about it. I don't need to know about this. The world is full of these kinds of things, to, oh, wow, it's really cool that like there's two different approaches to this. And I think that hopefully one of us, I don't know if his is better than mine, but I just thought it was cool that he took such a different tack than I would have.
Why did he blow up? Why is he growing so fast?
I think it's a combo. As I watch him, I can't tell you why other people like him, but I will tell you that his kindness, which is not immediately evident in his expressiveness, comes through in the longer form content. He's kind and thoughtful and asks questions about love and, you know, I believe that love will heal the world type things. And in someone who is both very technically brilliant and also is like a black belt in BJJ, it's a cool combination that you don't often get, which I think sort of similar to Joe Rogan, who's like a meathead who loves psychedelics and played Quake addictively for 10 years or something like that. So he's got this weird combination of traits that you don't get in, I think, most people. But yeah, so that was one little internet thing. What else I got here? We talked about a lot of this because it's been 2 weeks.
I know. Yeah. The problem with skipping a week is sometimes we can bite our tongue for 3 days before we talk about a topic, but not for 13.
Well, I'll ask you this one because this is one that I haven't said. So I mentioned that I found Nomad Capitalist, which is this guy on YouTube who travels the world essentially, but I think a fundamental precept of his is go where you're treated best. And he considers governments almost like suitors, like prospective boyfriends or girlfriends, and feels seemingly no allegiance to the place that he was born. At first, I was like, that's messed up, because that was just a knee-jerk reaction that I had. But as I thought about it, I do think that I have been, as we all have, inculcated with the sense of duty to the amorphous idea of the American government, irrespective of what it does for us. We're all told that it does so much for us and is so good and it's the greatest country in the world. And I realize that I have sort of a narrative in my head about, you know, there's still that lingering America's number one and it's taken care of you and it's done everything for you in the back of my head. Not to say that it's not better than many places.
Well, how does he deal with friends and family? So for instance, the reason I wouldn't want to renounce citizenship, even if I thought that the U.S. government and I were even, because they had provided a lot of services for me over the last 33 years, but I have paid them a lot in taxes, so let's call it square, right? Just business transaction. If I renounce my citizenship, become a citizen of Singapore, I can only come here for a certain amount of time each year, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So how does he deal with the fact that I assume the majority of his friends live in the U.S., his family probably lives in the U.S.?
I think any longer that's not true. I think he now, he does what we looked at, the trifecta, which is where you do 4, 4, and 4 months a year in different places, and you move depending on weather and all that kind of stuff. He's got a wife, and I think he's made friends in those new places. Now, his family of origin, I suspect, is still in the U.S., but he visits them. And to be fair, the amount of times that I see my family, they might as well be in a foreign country. I only see him 3-4 times a year.
So he has a core crew that he travels with, or it's just him and his wife?
I think it's,
and then they have different.
I don't know his story, but I believe it's him and his wife, and they have made friends
in each place.
In each place, yes. Though I don't think that was as big of a concern for him as it was for you. It seems, at least the way that he talks about it, that finances and recovering, you know, the 40% of taxes that he was paying, and he now pays 1% globally, is important. So I don't know. I just had a knee-jerk reaction to that. Like, that's fucked up because you're supposed to love America. And then I went, oh, wait, I've been brainwashed into this because, you know, the country that I was born into in 1987 is not the same country that invaded Iraq in 2003, is not the same country that is around today in 2021.
Well, my thing is, are you going to expand your sphere of care or shrink it? So most people go, I'm a U.S. citizen. I care about my country. My country provides for me. If you're going to throw that away, then there's two things you can do. You can say, I'm a global citizen. I used to pay 40% taxes. Now I pay 1% taxes. So I'm going to donate 20% of my money to helping people in Africa and 10% of my money to helping people in East Asia. And I'm going to keep 60% for myself. But instead of just funding a government that I don't care about, I have earned through clever problem solving the right to determine where my charity goes. Or you can shrink your sphere of care to just yourself and go, I don't care that the government helped me. I don't care that the country I currently live in has a government that helps me. Contractually, I only owe 1% of my money, so I'm going to keep 99% for myself. And, my bias probably comes through in how I language that, but I don't think it's wrong to shift your sphere of influence or your sphere of care. But I would prefer, if I were friends with someone and they did this, I would say, great, you've just freed up a ton of capital in a world that still does help you. You were provided for from 0 to 18 with an education. Everywhere you live, whether it's the US or elsewhere, you probably take advantage of public roads and police. And so to go take yours, but give nothing back to the community that raised you, the community you live in, or the communities in need, that seems weird. But if you're going to go, okay, I'm going to give 30% of my money to some combination of this, either the country that I was raised in, or I'm going to say, no, even though there's only 1% tax, I'm going to go donate to the local police, the local firemen, the local construction companies that provide me the current life I have in Singapore or Puerto Rico. Or you go, I don't need to do that because Singapore is killing it, so I'm going to reach out to Africa. And all of that I think is great. But when you go, I'm going to keep 99% for myself, it just goes, to what end? You aren't alone in the world. You aren't alone in the universe. So.
Yeah, that was my exact. There's the legal argument. There's the moral argument, which is like, you owe more than 1%, and not even just there's owe, and then there's an additional like, look, you were born. I'm a determinist. I know you're not, but like you happen.
No,
to
I
be
am
born,
for other people, just not myself.
You happen to be born on a wonderful roller coaster.
Yeah.
Like, congrats. I know you think that it was all. There's no free will. Yes, you did hard work, but like you got a great roller coaster. It's time for you to go spend some money to like improve other people's roller coaster. And when I say roller coaster, what I mean is, if you're a determinist, you believe that you are sort of locked into a track of which you can peer out of and enjoy and watch and be conscious of, but not that free will is almost a nonsensical thing. If that doesn't make sense to you, we've talked about it in the past. Go check out Sam Harris' Free Will. He has recently done a sense on it. But yeah.
But no, my thing is just that we're all, to the extent that you haven't been murdered in your sleep by someone taking your stuff, you've benefited from public services. So I would say, if you don't want to give money to the U.S. government, you want to do it to other
charities,
good causes, then sure. But if you want to go, I made mine, I'm completely self-made, I should keep 99% of the money I make because of how clever I am, I would suggest that maybe that's a little too much self-congratulatory nature.
I agree. And quite frankly, if you universalize that rule, it would be an awful planet. Like the idea of this libertarian ideal where we all just respect property rights and tremendous amounts of inequality is a joke. So that would fall apart very quickly if people started to follow that. Now, here was the thought that I had. I don't think I'm going to leave the U.S. for the reasons that you mentioned, which is family, friends, all that kind of stuff. So I'm locked in. But if I wasn't and I was playing this game and I did go somewhere, because where I did land is tax rate effectively last year in California is 43%. A lot of it goes to stuff that I wish it didn't go to. 50% of which is the Department of Defense, which you can say is defense or war, depending on your perspective. And I just wouldn't allocate it the way that it is being allocated for me. So if I were to leave and free up, all of that, what is the appropriate amount for me or anyone to think about paying? Because kind of what taxes do for a lot of people is they make them feel like, okay, we're clear,
I paid what I owe.
I pay what I owe. But what's interesting is if you're in Australia, that's 25%. And if you're in California, in the upper bracket, that's 53% at your highest marginal rate. That's a big difference.
Sure.
So like, how does one morally navigate the correct amount?
I have put no thought into this, so I don't know. The one thing I will say is I do like actually the philosophy around a marginal tax rate. Now, people game it, and I'm not saying it's done perfectly in the U.S., but the idea that you would give a different percentage the more you have, that makes sense to me because we don't have this infinite need for wealth. So yeah, my answer to this, which I don't have fully thought out, is it's going to be lower if you make 20 grand a year than if you make 20 million a year. Not just in absolute money, but even in percent. But I don't know the number, if it's 10 or 15 or 30 or...
I was just thinking, I was like, this is not an impossible future for me to find myself in where for whatever reason, I don't want to be in the US and I go abroad and my tax rate effectively goes down what then do I need to set as like, no, this is the floor of which you need to contribute?
Well, honestly, the biggest thing that scares me about the renouncing of citizenship is how permanent it is. Because if you could renounce your citizenship, but since you were born in the U.S., you could take it back.
You can, yeah, go ahead. Renouncing, I think there's federal and there's state, so you could get out of state tax. We don't need to get into the.
Well, yeah, you get out of state taxes easily. You literally just move to Texas and then go live abroad 12 months a year, but just claim Texas. But I think to pay 1%, you have to renounce your U.S. citizenship.
You may be right, yeah.
As a guy with a sleeve tattoo, let me tell you, sometimes permanent decisions seem like a good idea at a time, and then you're like, I didn't really need to do this. I don't regret it, but I will say I'm totally neutral on my own tattoo. Yeah. It has no cost and no benefit. So was it worth $5,000 and 50 hours of sitting in a tattoo chair? Like probably not, because it's completely like not having it.
Yeah.
And that has taken me 5 years to land on that decision from when I made it. So I could see myself renouncing my citizenship at 33 and at 45 just being like, shit. I sure wish I had that U.S. citizenship.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I almost married someone in Brazil to get Brazilian citizenship. It only took 6 months for me to be glad that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. If you could do takesies, backsies with the government and come back and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I want to start paying my taxes again. And they would just give you citizenship again. Then it's like, yeah, why not take a flyer? But if it's permanent, which is just my uneducated impression, that would be my hesitance. It's like you might just end up in 2030 saying, it would be cool to live in the U.S. for 12 months.
Yeah, well, you know who doesn't feel that is our friend Benji, who was born in Australia. You know what I mean?
Like, well, he lives with in the same building as his family.
Well, this is, I guess, what I was saying. Is like,
oh, dude, if all my friends and family died...
Family's not going to live forever, dude.
If all my friends and family died, I'd renounce my citizenship. I'm just a lone ranger that knows no one I know is alive. Yeah, why not? I'll just go donate to charity and live in Singapore.
Yeah. Well, speaking of taxes, I think Joe Biden releases his plan today. I could be wrong. So we're going to find out how we're affected. But we had chatted about this.
I had this on my list, yeah.
Well, it's actually not. It's not what I initially thought. We were hearing that taxes were going to be raised on people who make $400,000 or older or over in the U.S. And we're like, man, there's such degrees of wealth. You know, there's people who make over $500,000, $1 million, 10 million, 100 million, $1 billion, and from 10 to 100 to $1 billion to 100 billion are orders of magnitude.
Yeah, this is what I thought was interesting. I'm very curious if his tax plan has updated. So maybe I'm working on outdated information, but I'll just say from the public reception of it, it seemed like from Reddit, basically, that people were all on board with taxing people who make $400,000 or more because they want to tax the rich and they want to tax the billionaires. And I think that shows, unfortunately, that people don't know how billionaires make their money, which is through cap gains.
Well, so that good news is, and just so you're not speaking out of turn, he did talk about. We'll see if it's. I know he's always talking.
He's always talking about.
We'll see. He's saying that he's going to fund this giant infrastructure plan with a corporate tax rate hike and a cap gains hike.
What I'm saying is the public reception. Yeah. People who are saying, "Yeah, tax the rich. Anyone over $400,000 or more." It's like if you want to tax the rich, you need a wealth tax or a capital gains tax because they don't make their money in income the way that us normal people do. Like even if you're an entrepreneur or you have a salary. If you're making less than $1 million a year, you're making income. But if you're making $50 million in a year, you're probably making cap gains.
Unless you're like an actor or an athlete or something like that.
Sure.
They get lump sums of income, which I'm sure are taxed. Yeah, we got a funny system set up that has like, look, when you go up to like really, really rich, we're going to tax you. And then you break into the stratosphere where there is no gravity.
Exactly. No, that's all I was thinking. I was thinking we're going to miss 15%. Like everyone's saying, oh, we need to tax Bezos and Zuckerberg. A $400,000 or more income tax might miss them completely. That's all I was thinking. Yeah. Like you could be better off just doing a wealth tax and you would lower taxes on 99.99% of everyone in the U.S., but you would skyrocket the taxes of the highest earners.
Yeah.
Well, if you just got rid of all income tax and did just a wealth tax like Warren Buffett has been proposing for decades.
Yeah. We have to see how this one shakes out because I don't want to speak out of turn. I had initially thought that he was going to skip this second half, but then I saw it's all headlines. So who knows? This is the funny thing, and this relates to actually another point that we've talked about in the past, how the headline can be so misleading from the content.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
To say, it's an infrastructure plan. It's actually a plan that just funds military operations abroad or something like that. So who knows what the details of this thing will be. But speaking of...
even some headlines, I'm going to get this story wrong, but your brother was telling us about some hip-hop artist and his hip-hop artist girlfriend, and they got in a fight, and the headline was, guy leaves elevator while woman is left on the ground. and the headline makes him seem like he's the abuser.
Mm-hmm.
But then it turns out that she punched him 3 times, tried to steal his bag. He like ripped the bag out of her hand and she fell because of the force of him pulling the bag.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, she was left on the ground. And they cut the part where she hits him 3 times and he never hits her back. Yeah. So yeah, the headline can sometimes convey the complete opposite of reality.
So an example of this, which is apropos, not the same exact topic. So LA just achieved a status of no kill shelters in 2020. And people were, in the cat community, which I happen to have an ear in because of, I'm not going to say her name publicly.
Someone you're seeing.
She was telling me about it. And apparently the reason that they got their no kill status is because, well, first off, no kill means that 90% of animals that are deemed healthy and adoptable are not killed, which is to say, no kill means 10% can be killed.
Okay.
So right off the bat, it's a funny use of the word no.
All our shelters are no kill shelters.
Yes.
We only kill 10% of our animals.
Secondly, that it was COVID, which is to say that these things shut down and stopped taking in new animals. So just by simply shutting the doors and having like no adoptions and no help happening, because there wasn't transit, they were able just to kind of keep the animals that they'd had and feed them and keep them in cages. And that's why they hit the no-kill thing. But additionally, it also has these crazy incentives where what you want at that point is to have only like the healthiest animals that come into your thing. And you can have the slush fund of like weaker animals that are unadoptable that go elsewhere. It's also just for LA County. So they say LA. So what they essentially do is they take all these unadoptable animals.
And they ship them out.
And they don't let them come into these LA things. And they send them to the suburbs where they're just like gassed or euthanized en masse. It's just funny. It's like this self-congratulatory headline that made everybody feel good.
We did it.
It hides, unfortunately, and the worst piece of it is instead of just having the eye on the ball of animal welfare.
Yeah.
You now have your eye on the ball of achieving no-kill status, which is an incentive that is sometimes directly opposed to the welfare of the animals because it's like, look, maybe there's this old animal that we can give a more comfortable month to because we have the cage. We have the space, we have the bandwidth. But if we take it in and then we euthanize it, then we lose our no-kill status. So like, sorry, you go to, Pasadena or some other place or just die on the street. We're not taking you in.
Yeah.
I just like, man, that's it's the same thing with like cage free and all these kinds of buzzwords.
It reminds me of the same thing we've talked about over and over, which is you really have to define what you're trying to accomplish clearly. Because if you're trying to accomplish better lives for the animals in LA that don't have homes, that's going to actually get you different, better outcomes than if you're trying to accomplish achieving no-kill status in all LA shelters. And I feel like we're committing this mistake all over the place in the US. We're setting the wrong goal, working to achieve it, and actually walking in the wrong direction of our real goal that we can't quite figure out how to state accurately.
Yes, because at the end of the day, what we want is the award for the no-kill or the award for, Amnesty International A triple plus, friendship thing or whatever. So I just thought that was funny. She was just like listening, and it's not in LA, and it's not this, and it's not this. I was like, my God.
Was she aware of all the problems with it?
She was angry by it, and it was very important to her because it's the world that she lives in. And she got on social media and made a post about how this is not this is not cool and this is not okay, and we shouldn't be celebrating all of this. By the way, we do have a sponsor for this episode. Thank you guys to Kettle and Fire. They make bone broths. I know, Ben, you're a big bone broth guy for your micronutrients. Why don't you tell us about it?
So I drink it every day. As my diet gets more and more restrictive, it's harder and harder to get high quality protein. And so this is a very easy way to get high quality protein, micronutrients. I'm not a cook by any means. So the fact that it lasts forever till you open it, and then you can just microwave it to cook it. You can get plain bone broth. You can also get ketogenic soups and things of that nature. So it's a big part of my diet and something that I drink almost every day. So thank you guys for sponsoring the podcast.
Yeah, and we've had discussions about this. I won't say it every time, but the bones are no extra animals are killed for these bones. This is something that we've spoken to the founder about. We've had lengthy discussions about the ethics of this and feel at least for today, feel comfortable promoting this, even though that I'm a pescatarian, and we've talked about avoiding anything that's not ethically up to par when it comes to your diet choices. And we feel that this falls safely in the category of okay to do while still being an animal product and getting your protein. So if you guys want to check that out, it's, kettleandfire.com/charisma or link in the description. So
Charlie and Ben.
/Charlie and Ben.
Oh, is it Charlie and Ben?
I think, yeah.
We'll put the link in the description beneath if you guys want to check it out. Do you have I have some other stuff that I can hop into, but these
go
are
ahead.
kind of like random one-offs.
Go ahead.
We talked about this before, so I apologize if this feels stale, but I thought it was interesting when I discovered it. So Ben and Justin and I and my brother and my other friend and coworker, Ivan, have been playing League of Legends for hours every day. Today, we have our Dungeons and Dragons thing. I saw a question that maybe we'll answer, which is you talk about how you don't really care as much about earning money, but you still want, in the Matt Pat video, you talked about admiring how he can get the views and do that so well. Like, what's the deal? And I realized
It's a good question. We should answer it.
And I will. But part of it, not the entirety, is like, I just love games. I just love problems. And if you tell me that there's a game where I gotta, Sudoku, figure the numbers out, or make the numbers go up, or make the graph go up, or kill the enemy team more times, or whatever. Go ahead.
Well, and different games are valued incredibly differently by society. So the game of making your YouTube channel get more subscribers leads to friends and family that I never hear from reaching out to congratulate me on my excellent performance. And getting more money is lauded by friends and family and society and the movies you watch. But no one is lauding you if you beat a video game.
Yeah. Nobody congratulates me on League of Legends. In fact, I feel an internalized from when I was little sense of, which I've mostly shaken or at least pushed through, of shame, of like, this is a poor use of time, and it would have been better had I spent it reading a book, practicing the guitar.
Well, you're told that growing up. I mean, You're literally told this video games are a waste of time, and you'd be better off if you were doing something you didn't enjoy as much that were towards the pursuit of, growth is honestly, even if you're being pushed towards growth, that's good parents. Mostly money and status.
Or even basketball was a more acceptable game than Super Mario was. And I think that part of that, which hasn't quite clicked out of my mind, and maybe the new generation has this implicitly built in, is that the games that I played were single player, optimize the number, do it over and over and over again. And at the end of the day, I remember beating like sim apartment building and just feeling empty on the inside. Like, I'd made the thing, I'd built this giant skyscraper, and I was like, now I can't sleep, and this feels awful. And I think games have added dimensions from since I was little that are fundamental things that make people happy. So I was just listing what I think the things that have been human for the longest time. And
this is the point I think is interesting. So this is the list of things you were thinking about, like throughout all of human history. What are the things
staples
that people have pursued that seem to make them happy?
So, and I didn't write them all, but it's on the one sense, there's a degree of violence, which is enemy tribes, getting your food.
Oh, so we're going beyond happy. We're just going, this is what humans have done. This is what humans have done throughout history.
We are evolved biochemically to have a response to this in the appropriate situation that is positive, which is to say, like, there's something about MMA that gets people fired up, and hunting that gets people fired up, and even football, which is, as close to like ritualized violence as our major sports get.
Sure.
So you got that one. You've got food on the other hand. You've got all these foodies, people who are just like, food is this foundational thing. Sex, spending time with other people in relationships, which can be related to a sexual partner, doesn't have to be. Games, and whether that's like kids throwing sticks to hit bocce ball style thing that I'm sure we've played for hundreds of thousands of years. Stories told around the campfire, fundamental. As soon as we got language, sounds like we were telling stories. Art, you got music, you got pottery, dance, all that kind of stuff. And then it seems that there's also like a spiritual dimension or a caring or a helping. If you see a wounded animal, even though you're a hunter, you're like, this is my animal. Like, I'm going to take care of them. But in any event, there's fewer than 10 foundational things, at least as I'm describing them, and maybe you can think of more. But games back in the day were just hitting on this like video games. We're hitting on this very narrow, like, make the number go up, optimize thing, which I think was empty to a degree.
Yeah, or antisocial a little bit. You're alone. You're normally, at the very beginning, you're alone in a room. Maybe you have one other person there.
Exactly.
Often,
Pong. You're just, and maybe there's another person. Maybe you're just playing the computer. Then at some point in our childhood, which my parents didn't get, story was added. And as we're co-op, but I was into the story games. I was into these RPGs, and like I was one of the stronger readers for my age, because literally I was just reading these RPGs, and I would see words. I remember on a test in 7th grade, it was, what is a carapace? And I'd played StarCraft, and Zerk had carapaces that were their armor. So I like knew all these random words, and people were like, what the heck? Story was added when we were little. And now recently, I really think they've started to optimize the relationship part of it. You know, we're all on our headsets. You could be, I play with my friend in Australia sometimes. Like we're chatting in between. It's teamwork, cooperation. So this now hits on 3 major human staples. And I really just want to everyone and myself, shake the idea that this is a worse use of time than basketball or reading a book.
Well, basketball has
the
additional benefit of health.
Sure.
I think the downside, the danger of video games is if you do too much of them and you ignore other parts of your life, they can come at the cost of your health and of your financial situation, because it's pretty hard to play basketball every day for 6 hours a day. Mm-hmm. It's just tough. You can't really do it. So even if you love basketball, you're probably going to play once a day for an hour or 3 times a week for a couple hours. It doesn't eat into other parts of your life, and it keeps you physically healthy. Mm-hmm. And I think the danger of video games, which I will play and enjoy, is if you do it to the detriment. You can play video games to the detriment of your other relationships, your physical health, and your monetary situation. Mm-hmm. And it's really tough to play basketball in such a way that it costs you your romantic relationships, your money, and your body.
Sure.
Most likely your body, actually, if you overwork it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of those things are more addictive. Like food, clearly, is people can eat beyond a level. People can treat sex in such a way. It's tough to dance too much. I think in 2021, it's tough to find people who are like, I just can't stop.
No, it's
12 hours at a stretch.
Yeah, I guess you can do art so much that it costs you your physical, your body, or your relationships.
I would say art has not yet had the technological dopaminergic insertion that makes it so hard to step away from.
I'm just thinking there are people who go into a dark room 12 hours a day to paint, and they end up losing their health or their friendships.
Vincent van Gogh.
They go a little bit crazy. Yeah. But no, I think that's the downside. Honestly, I guess for me, I don't know what other people think, but if someone says, oh yeah, I play 1 hour of video games a day, it's like, okay, cool. The downside is when someone says, hey, I don't want to play video games, but I keep doing it because I'm addicted. Or I choose to do it 8 hours a day, which I like, but it's just made me fail out of school. That's the only thing, is these things are engineered to be more addicting than basketball, which doesn't really have people trying to figure out, how do we get people to never stop doing this?
Yeah.
You know?
I understand. So I totally agree. The thing that I was thinking of is I'm probably just going to make this list, and the one that I don't do a ton of is violence. And I wonder, because I do listen to people like Joe Rogan and you who do MMA. As I looked through that list, I was like, the biggest missing piece in my life is violence.
But you've tried it. I actually think people are just wired differently, because I would agree with you. If you were sitting here, you said, I've played guitar all my life, I was a straight A student all my life, but I've never tried boxing or jiu-jitsu. I would say, yeah, go for it and stick with it for a month or 2. You might love it. But you've done years of Muay Thai and jiu-jitsu, because you just always were on the impression that you were going to get in a fist fight
One day I was going to get in a fight.
And so you've done it for years. And every time we would talk about it, people would say, why do you do jiu-jitsu? I would say, I love it. It is a high afterwards. I'm elated on the car ride home. And you would always say, I don't feel that way. I'm just here for self-defense purposes.
Yeah.
So I think you just might not be wired that way. Like if we were in an ancient society, you might not be a frontline fighter.
Sure, and some of the frontline fighters might not want to sing or dance. You know what I mean? Like if there are 9 or 10 broad human categories, it's not to say that every human throughout history is equally interested in all of them.
I'm just thinking, if we were in ancient Greece, I would be somewhere between a grunt and a general, and you would be somewhere between beggar or Socrates. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think Socrates was also a fighter, was he?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Yeah. So maybe there's just...
It's interesting. So we've got, not that I need to make this, but you know how you've got the love languages, the 5 things that people do. I wonder if you categorize this, if it would be some sort of a helpful categorization for understanding people. Because as I look through this, games is such a theme in my life. Like I've been a tinkerer and a thinker and a strategizer my whole life, and there's other people that aren't like that. They've been dancers their whole life, or they've been foodies. I've never understood foodies, man.
Yeah.
It's I mean, I can see that they enjoy food, but I don't relate to that at all.
Music calls to you.
Yeah.
I played piano for years, and I played saxophone for 10 years, and I tried guitar, and then I tried piano again as an adult, and I never liked playing the saxophone. I did it because I wanted to get into a good college.
Yeah.
But it was never ever fun to practice. Whereas when I had vocal cord surgery and I couldn't work out because I would hurt my body, I was shadow boxing in the basement. I just loved that combat thing. And I had to drag myself to practice. And I walk into your apartment, you're just playing guitar for no audience by yourself. Like, I think some people just have different.
I do want to lean into, and I guess if you're listening to this, part of this is to sort of potentially make this own list in your own life and find the weak areas, because there's always an opportunity that you just haven't leaned into something enough. I do feel like what would be super cool for me, we go to the gym, we do like the routinized, like, bench press, pull up, whatever. A physical activity that I enjoyed as much as I enjoy League of Legends or Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure. That's why I surf.
I don't have that, man. Yeah. I went surfing. I was like, this is a pain, dude.
You used to have that with basketball, though.
I used to have it with basketball, and then I got old, and I don't know. I guess you know what? I still like basketball. If I could get,
you just feel like you suck at it now.
If
you showed up and were as good as you were at 17, you would like it.
Well, if I was as good as at 17, I'd still get stomped relative to the court, relative to the people I was playing.
I watched you hit 7 threes in a game once.
Not in a row. I was chucking. That's something that I should look into. I thought, I liked spike ball for a minute, but I sucked at it so hard.
I think it's basketball for you. Henry and I have said this a bunch of times. I don't know why you never come when we go play.
Yeah, maybe.
I think so. Because the thing is, I played basketball, jiu-jitsu, boxing, surfing, and I've loved them all, right? Every time I do any of them, I love them. You've done basketball, boxing, surfing, jiu-jitsu, and you don't like 3 of the 4.
Yeah.
So I would circle back to the one you do like. Maybe. Especially, it also goes with your whole tap into your inner child, right?
I hated basketball.
As a kid?
My dad made me play.
Oh, you only liked it in high school. Maybe that's why you don't play anymore. Maybe you think playing basketball is a win for your dad.
Oh God, I hated it. That was his thing. And that was my way of standing against him. So I'll figure it out. But
there we go. That's why you won't play. You can't make me anymore.
What else? We watched a video that I thought was interesting. Just 2 Americas at the very least, and perhaps this is true in the rest of the world if you're watching. There was a reporter who had asked Ted Cruz to wear a mask as he was giving a press conference. His response was, "No, I've been immunized. If you feel uncomfortable, you can stand back." And
he's had both vaccines, right?
I believe so. But what was fascinating is that depending on where you went, this was like this clip, unadulterated, same start, same finish, was evidence reinforcing 2 different worldviews. And that's fascinating to me. Like that you come in with such, I think Astral Star Codex calls them trapped priors, which is all of the things that you've heard about coronavirus, understood about Ted Cruz, believe about kindness in the world, and how you should defer to discomfort or not defer to discomfort in a situation. Just lets people look at the same exact situation and come to, oh my gosh, this guy is a science-denying monster. We have the variant out, and COVID variant's going to kill everybody. And my take, which was more like, finally, like, this is why we're getting vaccinated.
Well, yeah, I'm confused. If Ted Cruz got the vaccine but can't give a press conference without wearing a mask, then that seems to mean we will wear masks forever. Because even if 100% of the population is immunized...
I could steel man it. There's variants, and
well, that's what I'm saying.
You just want to get over the finish line and have absolutely 0 COVID cases before we take off our masks.
So wait, just hear me out. If there's variants and the vaccine doesn't help against them...
It's imperfect.
Then we will wear masks forever. If Ted Cruz has to wear a mask at a press conference.
I think the steel man is if we all lock ourselves, if we all locked ourselves in a room for 6 weeks and interacted via robots delivering food, COVID would die. Like, it would just be gone. And so let's get as close to that as possible. And then the other thing is, which I think is a constant question, at least in America, is how do you handle someone saying that what you're doing makes them uncomfortable and in what circumstance.
What can we do? So I think this is I think there are two interesting things. Can we do a quick like what this behavior would look like if we actually did it, and then can we go to the
Sure.
So because the thing with the vaccine is, okay, let's say that if you have the vaccine, there's a small chance you can still get COVID, and whatever that chance is. And so maybe Ted Cruz is putting some people's lives in jeopardy.
Meaning he could get it.
He could get it. Someone else could get it. That's also true of the flu. That's also true of driving a car. That's also true of a lot of things. And so my question is, we have all agreed that you can do things that might hurt other people. Otherwise, we should have been wearing masks since the day I was born, because the flu has always existed and the flu has always killed people.
Yeah.
I know COVID is more contagious. I'm not trying to downplay it, but I'm saying
but over the last 2 decades,
with the
flu has
vaccine,
killed more people than COVID has in
if the whole
2020.
population is vaccinated, I thought the point was to get to a world that didn't have COVID restrictions, I guess that's what I thought we were aiming at. And if the goal is make sure no one ever gets COVID again, then yeah, we should all be 6 feet apart forever while wearing masks forever.
Yeah.
And so to me, it seems like COVID has become something that is treated with a different thought experiment than everything else.
Yes.
Because you would never let someone bring their cell phone into their car. Because if you bring your cell phone into your car, there's a risk you text and drive. Yeah. And that increased risk, by the way, texting and driving leads to car accidents. So
the advantages can be completely discarded because we don't care about the advantages. What we care about is
zero lives lost.
Acceptable. Yes. 0 lives lost. We have to get this down. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just interesting that we don't apply this to other. We have like the loosest drunk driving policy of any country, I think.
Well, we've talked about this, that one of our biggest, where I don't know which side of the political aisle this lands on, problems with COVID is that it is consistently ripped out of context, in the sense of like 400,000 Americans dead. Is that a lot, a little, compared to what? Compared to previous years, compared to all causes deaths? If our goal is the reduction of suffering and the reduction of needless deaths, especially as it affects, I think that most of us would agree, if an 85-year-old loses 5 years of their life, that is not as much of a tragedy as if a 25-year-old loses 60 years of their life, because, you have to pick one.
Well, my other thing is I think I think there should be an evolution of how one feels about COVID. So when it's first coming out and you don't know how dangerous it is, and it seems like it's killing a lot of people, and so you have certain rules, that makes total sense. But then as more information comes out, I think that should change. And then as people get vaccinated, I think that should change.
This is part of the problem, is as more information comes out, right? Clearly, there's different information. And even the tenor, it could be the same information with a different tone, with a different contextual reference. 400,000 Americans are dead versus fewer Americans died of COVID than died of heart disease in 20. Those can both be true.
Sure.
Information.
Yeah, I guess I'm just confused and this can be the answer, but I'm confused at what the future looks like when we're all vaccinated or have all had COVID. Because if Ted Cruz is supposed to wear a mask, then are we, and this can be the answer, we're just forever social distanced and forever wearing masks because this virus is out in the world?
Well, I think that there's a second thing, and I don't know what this particular reporter, I can't read their mind, but I did get the sense, this is me doing a take that is not based on concrete evidence, that there was a power dynamic at play, which is, can I make you do something? It would make us feel more comfortable. And I think that that's the second question. I don't know if you are ready to get to it. That we've entered into a space where, I think in American culture and perhaps in other areas of the West, where being uncomfortable is a position of power, because the understood meta ethic is that everyone needs to act to reduce discomfort, especially along certain axes. Like one of them might be with regards to with COVID. One of them is going to be with regards to jokes that you make in the workplace that were acceptable 50 years ago, that aren't, all those kinds of things.
But it is very specific. So, because for instance, if you say a joke that I find,
if you make a joke about Donald Trump in the workplace and I say, hey, that makes me uncomfortable, I voted for him. That is.
Oh yeah. Well, I was even thinking, let's say you say that you're made uncomfortable by a joke, and I should not make it again. That's like 2021 tends to be, defer to Charlie on this. But if you're making out with a guy and I say, hey, we're in public, can you not do that? It makes me uncomfortable. That would be frowned upon in 2021.
Yeah.
So it's actually not just about minimizing discomfort.
Yes. No, and I think that this is one of the inequalities of the liberal conservative divide, is that I guess the liberal worldview, or the left, or whatever it is, and I'm kind of formulating this in my mind as I go, so it might not be true, is we have these things that we believe to be true about the world, and our ethic is of reducing discomfort. And then the conservative worldview is we have these other things that we believe to be true about the world, but the ethic is not about reducing discomfort. Like, you're not hearing as much of a push.
We live in California.
Maybe.
I mean, you literally might just go to Arkansas and see two gay guys make out and then have a bunch of people freak out on them.
Yes, but that's not, I'm uncomfortable. Does that make sense? It's not like, hey, could you stop? This is making me uncomfortable. The ethic might be fit in. The ethic might be conform. It might be something else, but it's not reduce my discomfort because I'm hurt. Or at least that's not the way that it's expressed.
I don't know. I mean, I could imagine someone who's super conservative being made very uncomfortable by PDA from a gay couple and then demanding them to stop. That's something that I can imagine pretty easily.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I can imagine it as well, and don't have enough.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think what happens is you defer to the culture so that when you're the conservative person in California, you don't have any power. Your discomfort does nothing. And actually, if you were to bring it up, I imagine that the people around you would turn on you if you were in public, right? And they would shame you. But then if you're in a red state and you were to do that, I think that the group around you might say, yeah, this guy's a good point. You guys should stop and get out of here. And I'm obviously, that's a little bit of oversimplification. Not everyone in certain places feels certain things, but I think it's the power goes to the people who believe what the majority of the people around them believe.
Interesting. So I'm formulating this as I go. Perhaps when you say, or that reporter says, for instance, it would make us all more comfortable, that is a bit of a covert way of having a duel of worldviews. You know what I mean? And what you're saying, without saying it, is COVID is dangerous and deadly, and the way that we need to deal with it is by all wearing masks.
Even if you're vaccinated.
Yep. And the way that you simply stated is, it would make me more comfortable. And I guess that's probably true in all different areas of America. So that, yeah,
it's the same thing when you poo-poo PDA from same-sex couples. It's the same thing when you say that certain jokes or words can't be said. Yeah, it's your way of saying this is
true, which kind of hides the naked fact that, like, these are two opposing worldviews that need evidence to be bolstered, and we can't necessarily inject all of that into this one interaction that's going to allow us to do it. So all that we say is, that makes me uncomfortable. Yeah, this offends my view of the world.
Yeah. And so forgetting where geographically it's located, I can imagine that same conversation happening between two people that were in a room of 10 people. And one goes, hey, it makes me uncomfortable that you're not wearing a mask. Can you put your mask on? The other one goes, I've been vaccinated. It's the whole reason I got vaccinated. I'm not putting my mask on. If the other people in the room think that wearing a mask is important even if you're vaccinated, and they all say so, the person is going to basically be pressured into the fact that they're outnumbered.
And if they're a YouTuber, then they'll go on an apology tour and say that they're so sorry, they should have recognized.
But if you put them in a room with 10 people who all turn on the person that made the request and said, that's stupid, I'm wearing a mask because I'm not vaccinated, but this person shouldn't because they are vaccinated, then that person will shrink in most cases because they're outnumbered 10-1.
Yeah.
So I think it's completely based on what the people around you side with.
Yeah. Yep. Which is,
and no one changes their mind, by the way. In both cases, they leave thinking the same thing. They're just going to alter their behavior temporarily to fit in.
I had a similar. So David Dobrik is in hot water now. The short story is that somebody that is in his vlog squad, which is the actors, or I guess they were friends. They weren't acting when then he did his vlogs, is accused of having raped a girl when they were filming a vlog, and David was in the house, and he
they weren't filming the rape, just to be clear.
No. They were like contributing to an environment I don't honestly exactly understand the criticism of David, but it's that he contributed to an environment that allowed for that or made jokes about it. Now,
no, he didn't make jokes. I think what they're saying is that he...
No, he did. Afterwards, he was like, he had a 5 out of 5, he negotiated it. Like, it was... My perspective of David's like, one, I'm not sure what happened in that room, but assuming that it was rape, David clearly didn't think so. You know what I mean? Like, anytime that somebody's cracking a joke, or not anytime, most of the time that somebody's cracking a horrible joke about, like, whether it's rape or dead babies or whatever, it's because they don't think that thing is a real, literal, hovering, looming threat. So that was, I do think that there was just a lot of heat on him from a lot of different angles, and this is one that really got him taken down. But what I found was interesting is you said, like, there's this room effect if everybody's saying it. Mm-hmm. So he was accused, the girl says that essentially she was too drunk to consent, and that's why that happened, that she didn't, I don't believe her claim is that she had said, no, it was that I was too drunk, I was passing out, I was falling asleep, and could not possibly have consented. What's interesting is that David went from, okay, where I sit, which is like, I don't know you, I don't know the guy that you accused, let's take all accusations seriously and investigate, and I support the investigation of this, like, take it very seriously, which is where I would sit in something like this too. I believe her. I 100% believe her. And the reason that he, in my opinion, went from, I'm going to sit and see where this lands to I 100% believe her is because the room around him went, you bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, which I thought was interesting because to me, with any claim of theft, murder, rape, embezzlement, whatever, it's like, the response should be, let's take this seriously and investigate. And his response is, I believe the accuser, which I think is dangerous in any sort of thing. Not to say that she's wrong. She might be 100% right, and I would treat it seriously were I the cops or anybody else. But it's just interesting that he that he had to immediately go, and so did all of his friends who had initially defended themselves or defended the crew or said I wasn't involved. They all then had to go so hard to I believe her, which I think is just indicative of the effect that you were talking about, which is when everyone around you says that you're wrong, all of a sudden it's not about getting to the truth of whether COVID is dangerous or not. It's about conforming to the social pressures that you feel on you. And I think that that's a continuing problem of the social media mob is that, I guess it's true in the world as well. It's not unique to social media.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about the David Dobrik situation. So without talking about that specifically, if you just zoom out, we've talked about this before. Your brain is wired to help you survive long enough to procreate. Mm-hmm. The pursuit of truth is not its primary purpose. And so when the pursuit of truth for anything, even if it's just, it's literally anything. I'm not even going to give an example. If ever the pursuit of truth gets in the way of your brain's, what your brain thinks will help you survive long enough to replicate, mm-hmm. it will change what you think is true.
Yeah, it's got one master.
So which means that you won't even know it. So you could find preposterous evidence, completely convincing, if the believing of that evidence helps you avoid violence, stay in your community, live long enough to procreate. That's why most everyone born into a very religious community ends up believing the religion they're born into. It's very rare to be born extremely religious as a Mormon and then decide that actually you're going to be an extremely devout Muslim instead. And it's very rare to be born a devout Muslim and then decide, no, I think the Mormon tenets of religion make more sense. So it's interesting because everybody finds their own birth religion's tenets the most persuasive if they're presented with other religious tenets.
Yeah.
And that's because there's a great cost to deciding that that's not true. So yeah, it's very hard to get yourself to actually objectively weigh if something's true or not if it has any cost at all
Any survival
to your
cost,
survival and ability to replicate.
Yeah, 100%. No, I've been thinking about religion, and I've been trying to expand the definition in my head, because typically I think of, like, your religion is like Judaism or Islam or Christianity or Scientology or like it's...
I think considering yourself a liberal or a conservative or a Democrat or a Republican or a communist or a capitalist can be a form of religion in the sense that you have the same devoutness and you require the same level of evidence against it to change your mind.
Sure. Well, that's what I was thinking about. Like, what are the elements that constitute, because this is one of the things that has blown my mind recently, and I've had to update my worldview. Typically, a very good heuristic is follow the money. You know, like when there's a decision made by a body and you're trying to figure out why did they do it, it's like, oh, they're going to make more money.
Yeah, why'd the news do this?
Why
or why
the
did
news
YouTube do this?
But you see, like, the news, CNN, like, got Donald Trump out of office. And
despite the fact that it's much worse for them.
It cost him so much money.
Yeah.
Like, you see this with a lot, and I'm not necessarily grouping this in the same category of, there are woke initiatives that companies are now undertaking that cost them money in the short and the long term. And that breaks a very reliable heuristic of mine, which is follow the money. When, you know, why did they give to that charity? Why did they do this? Like, typically it's you can follow the money and you see that there's value in it for them. Woke has broken that in many ways that I see. So I've been trying to figure out, one, I'm sure that I have my own quote unquote religion that I was born into, even though it's not one of the major labeled ones, but like, what are the things? And it seems to be, you know, what does wokeness have in common with a lot of the religions? Well, it's an overarching worldview that explains a lot of things. It tends to have an infidel. You know, like a lot of these religions have an outgroup, and in fact, the religions that seem to struggle to perpetuate, like Jainism, don't have that as much. It's like everything is sacred and wonderful. There's a proselytizing element. Like, you think of any sort of mimetic evolutionary thing, which is to say, imagine an animal that doesn't have a sex drive.
You're saying, when you say proselytizing, you mean they convert. They're
actively going out. Like, Jews don't have this in the same way.
We're like panda bears. We just refuse. We refuse. If you try to convert to Judaism, it's really hard.
Yes.
You have to go to a rabbi 3 times while they try to talk you out of it.
Yes. So, like, one of the things that makes religions, I guess this isn't one of the things that makes religions stick, but it's one of the things that makes religions last, is an evangelical proselytizing arm of it, which you see, of course, with woke.
Yeah. I would say so far everything you described also fits political parties.
Yeah.
Like, it's always been interesting to me that the pro-life political party is the pro-death penalty political party and the pro-gun political party. And that's not to say that any of those positions are wrong. It's to say that if you tell me your position on one of them, most of the time, and I know we're going to get comments from people that disagree because they're not like this, but most of the time, I can guess your political party and your belief on other things.
Oh, if you tell me,
so like,
what's your stance on abortion, what are the odds? 80 to 90%, I can list off 6 or 7 other things.
Which is just strange because they're not all based on the same philosophical belief, I guess is what I'm saying. So, same with taxes. You tell me your belief on abortion, I can probably guess how you feel about taxes. These things are very distinct in that you would think that you would have a philosophy that guided your economic, moral decisions and that they would lead you to unique decisions on each issue. But it tends to be that you get these clusters where if you believe one thing, I can guess where you fall on all the others. That's why I say political parties remind me of religion as well, in that they are a set of beliefs you adopt from other people instead of coming to them through internal investigation.
Sure. Yeah, I think you just triggered something. I don't know how, but I'm thinking of like the other things. So they have infidels. They also have wrong speak and incredibly intense punishment for stepping outside. So like if you leave an Amish community or a Mormon community, you're very likely to lose everyone. If you say the wrong words in certain religious communities, you're very likely to be kicked out. And I think this is true to a degree in the scientific community. Like if you take a stance on a hot button topic like climate change and deny or say that, hey, this isn't caused by humans or something, and you point to evidence which to the capacity of your brain supports that belief, people are not loyal to the scientific endeavor, which would, how do we incorporate this? You're a denier. You're probably, this is what I've heard at least, that you're shunned from
Really?
that community.
That's
what I've
surprising.
heard.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
That's what I've heard. And again, that's I don't take that to be gospel, but I do think that there's a built-in immune system against change in these sorts of things that I guess makes them perpetuate. But I don't have all of the elements of them listed out. But there's what I find fascinating is that yes, people care about money, and incentives explain a ton. And I mean financial incentives, but there is something that can get people to suicide bomb, blow themselves up, give up their job for someone else who was a marginalized person.
Or you'll see a tech platform risk its platform status, which would
risk
be
its platform status.
The death of it.
We're talking about YouTube, and
they will do it for a political.
The removal of a lot of right content, which is making it, to me at least, more and more obvious that they are publishers and not platforms, which mean that they're going to be regulated different. They open themselves up to all different kinds of lawsuits, which it's tough for me to imagine them winning.
Isn't this what you would want, though? Wouldn't you like people to put their morality above their greed?
Yes. It forced me to rethink the world, because that's when I think of, is that how you, that's not how the world tends to work. When I know most people and I think of what's your morality, I watch people take their stated morality and subsume it underneath their greed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I see all the time. And to see the reverse of that, which is a worldview superseding short-term gain, it makes it impressive. It makes me ask, what is the difference between a religious morality that supersedes short-term incentives and stated morality that we all have, which is always beneath it?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. No, and I like that distinction, because even forgetting business for a second, everybody says they don't lie, and then you just catch everybody saying things that aren't true. So there's that stated morality that most people feel very little attachment to if they can break their stated morality for more money, or to escape the conflict or a confrontation that they don't want to deal with, or I mean, this is what cheating is, right? So I wouldn't. People say all the time, I'd never cheat, and then they go make out with someone else because they can break their stated morality in exchange for temporary enjoyment. But then when you think you're going to go to hell for it, you still might do it, but you're less likely. So I do think there's more of a stickiness to people who have that religious belief versus just a stated moral belief.
Is it the case, and I'm trying to figure it out, my first hypothesis was that religious morality carries damnation with it, which is why it's so strong. But is that always true? I guess one of the most powerful things about Christianity is that God's always watching. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where you are. You do bad, damnation can follow you anywhere. But even then, man, people would still do all kinds of
people still
stuff.
cheat. Yeah.
So then I go, wait a second.
Sex, people still happening all over the place in religious communities.
But at the same time, you could get people to sign up for a crusade, and I guess they probably weren't asked nicely if they wanted to go. So I take that back. But it's I guess the question that I have not yet answered is, what does a belief or a worldview need to have to cause it to supersede short-term incentives, which sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't. I haven't quite figured it out, but it seems clear to me that wokeness has now entered that territory of it's not bound by short-term incentives, which makes it on par with the power of religion, because I think that has the same sort of power over people. So I don't know. Anything else?
Before we go on to answering questions?
Or anything.
You want to talk about the Colorado shooting or nah?
We can mention it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm just parroting your own thoughts back at you at this point, but I'll just say them for posterity. You had pointed out something interesting to me, which was we had a shooting in Atlanta, and we had people come on the news and say this was a race-inspired shooting. And we know that because even though the shooter said that it was for some other reason, we look at the outcomes. This is a common philosophy today. You just look at the outcomes. 6 of the 9 people shot were Asian. That's way more than the demographics of the population.
Went to Asian locations.
This is a shooting that was based on a desire for anti-Asian violence. And then I think a week or so later, there was a shooting in Colorado, a person of a certain race shot 10 people, 100% of whom I believe were the same race but different than the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
But the same news media, the same political pundits didn't cover it as a hate crime. They didn't assume it was racially motivated violence.
Mm-hmm.
And the shooter was Arab, I believe, and the victims
from
were
Syria. Yeah, and this was another thing that complicated, because the early things is the shooter came out alive, and as they do it from the overhead view of this person, they're fairly light skinned, and this is another.
Well, they
thing,
thought they were white.
Well, this is the thing. What is white? You know what I mean? Like, is it a skin tone thing? Is that how we're gonna do it? Because if we play this game in terms of like the hex code of your skin color, we're gonna get all kinds of confusing things.
Sure, but the victims were all Caucasian.
The victims were all white. Yeah.
And no news media
and this person was from
came
Syria
on and said this is a Syrian person motivated by hatred for white people. This was a anti-white.
They could have gone
shooting.
to a mosque. They could have gone to somewhere.
Yeah,
else.
this is a person. They easily could have picked a location.
They selected a location. Yeah.
And I'm not. By the way, I'm not saying that the first shooting was or wasn't race based, and I'm not saying the second shooting was or wasn't race based. It's just interesting. The most interesting thing that I thought about when you pointed it out was how differently they were covered. Mm-hmm. How the first shooting was very much a anti-Asian shooting, and the second shooting was very much covered as a we need more gun control shooting.
Yeah.
I have no takeaway, but that's just
I thought it was incredible that it happened a week later.
Two very unique ways to cover. Yeah. Given that the second shooting was even more like these are
100%.
All,
yeah.
I can imagine if this was a white shooter with 10 Asian victims, it would have been about anti-Asian violence. But when it's a non-white shooter with the white victims, it's about gun control. And maybe the issue is gun control. It's actually not to say that this was or wasn't anything, but it's mostly just this is how we're getting our news.
Well, I've sort of made I think that the woke stuff is a conclusion in search of evidence, you know, and so another thing that we spoke about that was these are minor things, and I try not, because I just what I've reminded myself lately is that as a person who is not religious, if you are, totally go for it. I've spent my whole life hearing things about religion and decisions that people made that I thought were silly because they were based on religious presuppositions.
That you don't believe.
That I don't believe. Mm-hmm. And that was the whole world. And now I'm just getting used to a world where there are woke presuppositions that make people believe the things that they believe that I think are silly.
Right. Like you happen to think the NBA is a meritocracy. You don't think it's run by people who favor black people because of their skin color.
Yes.
I happen to agree with you. I think that makes a ton of sense.
Well, that even the woke thing does, because this is the problem. And this is that it is the conclusion is, or I guess the evidence that is often searched for is like, look, if we have, these are the marginalized communities. They are, as it compares to women and men, women. As it compares to whites and non-whites, non-whites. And of varying degrees, they're that more victimized groups. As it compares to heterosexual, homosexual, homosexual. As it compares to cis and trans. These are the marginalized communities. And if they are overrepresented in any sort of negative outcome, we know that that's discrimination and systemic privilege and all of the kind of stuff. But if they're underrepresented in any sort of positive outcome. But if we see the reverse of that, like the NBA, like homosexual men earning 10% more than their heterosexual counterparts, like women living 7 years longer than men on average, making up 5% of prisons, fewer assaults, fewer homeless. Those can all be discarded.
They're not because of bias.
Those are not because of bias.
Yeah, which, I mean, by the way, I don't think that gay men in America make 10% more on average than straight men because of a bias towards them. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's because of a bias. But what you're highlighting is
that it is not a principle. It is not a principle that is applied evenly. It can only be applied in one direction.
No, and the danger is if homosexual men make 10% more than heterosexual men, and it's not due to bias, which I don't think it's because corporations are trying to pay gay people more, then when you do find a situation where the reverse is true, and let's say there's an imaginary world where homosexuals made 10% less than heterosexuals, it doesn't automatically mean it's due to anti-gay discrimination, although it could be.
Yeah, it could be.
But you would want to suss it out. Yeah. You wouldn't just assume
it. This is what I asked you. I was like, I just had this thing. I was like, oh my God, imagine if we lived in a world where men lived 7 years longer than women. Imagine if women made up 95% of prison inmates. I mean,
Well, that would be the bigger thing. If women made up 95%.
Would you hear those stats all day long? Like the government, the U.S. White House on their Instagram just put out a picture of $1. And this is how much people make. At the top is white men with $1. Then it's Asian women, 88 cents. And it's white women. Notably absent is above $1, which would be Asian men.
Yeah, they just they just didn't put it on the graphic.
They just didn't put it on the graphic. But that is just a microcosm of this worldview, which is the top is the oppressor, which is the straight white man. But it's like, oh my God, could you imagine a world where women lived less long? Can you imagine how often we'd hear about that? Can you imagine if they made up 95% of inmates or 75% of homeless people? Could you like that would be
I think we would hear about
a crisis. And again, my point with all of this is not that any particular instance is not discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
It's that it cannot be assumed to be.
Yeah, it might be. You just have to look into it and figure out why is this actually happening.
Yeah. And the other thing, just in terms of that was fascinating, like on Instagram, which I think is if YouTube, I would say leans relatively right and Twitter leans relatively left. Instagram, I believe, falls kind of in the middle of American politics.
I don't know.
On this particular post from the White House, which has this $1, and it's still up, you could see it. All of the comments are like, from, I think, middle of the road, like, this has been debunked. Like, this is nonsense. Like, this doesn't account for differences in choices or jobs, etc.
We also left off Asian Americans and not Native American Indians, but just from India, Indian Americans that make even more than
East
Asian Americans. Like, white Americans are not at the top of the earning totem pole on average. Mm-hmm. Although there are some making a killing, like Jeff Bezos. Like, that's not who makes up the highest median income as a race.
And what I take from that is I look at this and I go, there's no way that this is an honest attempt. There's no way.
Oh yeah, well, because they had Asian women on the chart, so it's not like they forgot Asian men.
Somebody immediately suggested in the comments that this is absent. You know what I mean? Somebody immediately suggested that you're missing this. You know, and it goes, oh duh, like that's so instant. And the only thing that I can relate that to,
at least they didn't delete the comment.
Yeah,
that'd be the 1984 way to handle it.
Good for them. But again, it's just a comment, but it's I think a microcosm. I'm going, how do I best understand this? And I go, oh, you have to understand this in the context. And I know that probably there's some religious people that feel attacked. I'm not intending it to be, but this is just my experience of religion was it is impervious to the pointing out of contradiction. You know, like I would remember speaking to my aunt about some of her beliefs when I was I was probably 16, and we were talking about her beliefs, and I brought up contradictions in them, and I remember we're okay now, but at the time she got very uncomfortable.
She started physically shake because she didn't have a verbal response to your
kind of like shut down the conversation, and we left, and then never spoke of it again. This was actually a conversation that was planned to move me towards Christianity, and wound up as like we will never speak of this again.
She was trying to return you to the flock.
Yeah, I think she loved me and cared about me and wanted what was best for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was impervious to the pointing out of contradiction, which is not true of her, I'm sure, in many areas of her life. It was like, oh, like you're redoing your patio and you know, you think you have the best guy for the best price, but here's actually someone who says they're cheaper. She'd be like, oh, that's great. I'm going to go with this other guy. But that's not what I see in these areas. And I'm just trying to get used to and constantly remind myself, this isn't new. You've lived with this for a long time. People are still, you could still be, you know, I love religious people, as you know, I have tons of friends that believe these kinds of things. We can have good discussions. Sometimes they don't want to continue. That's fine. And I'm sure the same is probably true to a large degree with people who hold the beliefs as exemplified in that Instagram photo, which is,
sure,
you're cool, I'm cool, we're fine. We're never going to cross this chasm except if you really, really love and trust me.
Well, with all of this, the biggest shifts for me is if you do elevate something to being a religion, you go, oh, I'm never going to talk this person. I'm never going to change their mind with a conversation. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could try to loosen the jar, like, you know, what's that YouTube guy we talked to? I forget the
oh gosh, I can't. His name is Street Epistemology.
Street Epistemology, yeah. So you can loosen the jar or whatever, but you would never expect to sit down with someone who's devoutly religious and be able to change their mind with a conversation. That's just ludicrous. It's obviously not going to happen in most cases. And I'm realizing, that's also true of political issues. It's also true of social issues. Like this is just, you can sit down and have a conversation with someone about so many things and change their mind. And then there's other things that just require a lot more than that.
If they're at a company that is, to your opinion, doing evil in the world where they make their bread from, right? So it's like anything that's survival, and survival can be literal survival or ego survival, is attached to, is very, very difficult. And this is, I guess, the most interesting piece is this is going to be true for you as well and me as well, which is to say, if you can identify those things that you depend upon for your survival, you have identified the most likely areas for self-deception. In fact, guarantees of self-deception in those areas. And survival is not just literal, like I said, it's not just literally living. It's continued pleasure. It's continued sense of this is who I am and my identity, which is why whenever I talk about psychedelics, it's like when they kill you and you get that ego death, all of a sudden you can see the truth. And it's weird. I wonder what comes first. If the ego death comes first and then you see the truth, or you see the truth and then the ego death happens. I'll pay attention next time. Do it. Anything else?
Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to hop in?
Oh, I do have something before we go to questions. I finally got a link for Marketing Step by Step. So yeah, this is a program. It's normally $1,000. We got it for you guys for $97.
Well, it's not normally $1,000. It used to be $1,000, right?
It still sells somewhere for $1,000.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't really understand how they do their pricing. I think depending on who has the link, there's a different price.
Got it.
I don't know. That's just my limited understanding. But it's the best program if you want to start a business of any of the programs I have ever gone through. And so I reached out to them and I said, hey, can we get a link to this? It's an affiliate link, so we split the money 50-50. I want to talk about it on the podcast. I want to send it to our email list. It was transformational for Charisma on Command. So yeah, I love the program. It's called Marketing Step by Step. It basically completely rewires how you think about business. I learned more from this program that's a month long than I did from 4 years in undergraduate business school. And it's the only reason, not the only reason. Without it, Charisma on Command would be far less successful today. So if anybody likes what we've done and wants to do what we've done, I highly recommend this program. So it's at ebenpagantraining.com/charisma, and we'll put a link in the YouTube description, but I'm super excited about it. And yeah.
This is going to be our standard go-to. We're compiling right now a page that has like, so you want to start a business, start here. 4-hour work week number 1, marketing step by step number 2, running lean number 3, and
that's
stop.
it. Like, get those 3, start your business. You don't need anything else. And then we'll have some other resources for when you've hit 100K.
Yeah.
And if you've hit 100K and you want to hit 1 million.
We're still building that out right now and trying to be as, what is the word? Is pithy the right word? As like tight and essentialist as possible.
I want to talk about this. I think it's done. It's got 6 things on it, and I think adding a 7th just detracts from the 6th.
You forget the pre-sell formula.
I don't think it's as core.
I built Charisma University.
But isn't it in Running Lean?
No, it's not. So Running Lean is the interview section and the coming up with the like, oh, it's charisma. That's Running Lean, which seems like a duh today.
No, and you co-create the chapters though, right? You co-create the modules.
That was the other one. That was pre-sell formula.
Really?
Yes.
I thought that was in Running Lean.
Nope.
Doesn't he make his chapters by talking to the people that the book is for?
No, that's how I used that. That was all pre-sell formula.
Oh, interesting.
That was how I wrote the book. That was how I made Charisma University. So Running Lean is, quite frankly, pre-sell formula is... Running Lean is a little bit more foundational, but it's a similar idea. It's a co-created process to really identify what the market needs, but it doesn't exist anymore. Pre-sell formula, it's now known as Interactive Launch 2.0. I think it's $1,000. We got it for free as a bonus when we signed up for this thing.
Yeah, can you buy it?
I can check it out. It seems newer. We can contact.
No, can we? I'm saying, can someone buy pre-sell formula?
Not the pre-sell formula, and I don't know if this is it, but I believe I was Googling this last night. They've now changed it to Interactive Launch. This is for someone. It's $1,000. So I'm like, don't go buy this right away. Buy this once you have an audience and you're trying to convert, especially if you're a coaching program into an online program, and you've got an email list of a couple hundred people or a YouTube channel of a couple thousand subs or something like that. That's where you want this. And what this lets you do is build out a program that is designed, and it's got The value of it is it's that it has exact ad copy emails to write. Like, here's your Monday email, here's your Wednesday email, here's your Friday email. It was so helpful when I did this the first time with the book and then again with Charisma University. But there's a handful. That's the big one. That's not on that page.
Got it. Yeah, because I think I think you just put the core ones on. I think when you have the 50 best self-improvement books, that is a disservice to the 10 best.
Well, do you think spin selling is on there? Because spin selling isn't for me. Like,
no, you put that on. I think prosperous coaches.
Oh, then let's take it off.
Okay.
It's not on there for me. I was just listing. I didn't think so. What was on it for me is you had a guy, Phil, who taught you to sell.
Yeah.
And then he just mentored you, and then you kind of passed that down to me. Mm-hmm. So we don't have a book on selling that's as quite as strong. Prosperous Coach is helpful, but it was that mentor that actually taught us to sell. But we can potentially think of other things if there's other categories, like how do I grow to $1 billion? It's like, I have so much resources. And
then there's other stuff that might make it on the list, but that we've read in the last year, and it's TBD. You know, this is stuff I know is excellent. There's other times you read business books and you think it's excellent because it sounds excellent, and then you try it and it's not so good. And so
E-Myth is that one for me. Not to say it's a bad book, but we thought that we could standard operating procedure our entire business after that, make it like McDonald's, throw the burger on for 5 minutes, flip the burger, 6 minutes later, you put it on, circle of ketchup, only 1.25 teaspoons. We tried doing that with a lot of the processes in Charisma on Command, and it just doesn't work.
Especially the scripting the videos, which is a bit more art than just, a McDonald's burger.
Yep.
But I think the guy who wrote the E-Myth also tried to E-Myth his business, and it didn't work, right?
Yeah, we've spoken about this. His next book is, this is just like the game, which is, it ends on this like thunderous, we did it using my process, and then the next book picks up at like, everything was falling apart. It's like, wait a second, you told me that this worked.
So for the game, he ends it with, I'm the greatest pickup artist on the planet, and then his next book comes out, and he has social anxiety around women.
Yeah.
What is the E-Myth's version of this?
E-Myths is, and again, it's not so much about him, but it's you build this systematized business, it can work, and you build it like a franchise.
And then you can leave. It doesn't require you.
And the next book is, we left all our franchises, and they started screwing everything up, and the business was losing money. And I was like, I wish you told me that before I spent 4 to 6 months trying to do this. Because as soon as I read that line, which was deeper into the book where it actually comes out in a story form, I was like, all right, I put it away. I was like, you MF.
This isn't going to work.
Like, and it's not that it's standard operating procedures have space in businesses.
Depending on the business.
Certain businesses that they work well on, like McDonald's, where you're hiring 15-year-olds out of middle school and high school. To have a routinized training to make a burger is totally possible.
And your product isn't supposed to be a $100 burger from a Michelin 3-star restaurant. Like the standardization process, you'd have to train more to go work at.
Standardization works when you need to repeatedly, with human inputs, create the same product. So if you're trying to like run a hotel, and it's like, here's how we do the cleaning, here's how we do this, here's how we like those sort of checklist things. Works really well.
Yeah, we're never going to change the sheets because people won't know any better.
There's many businesses that are not like that, ours included.
Did you hear about that thing they did?
No.
Someone that's, they just have to come up with news stories. So they went to a hotel and they took a blacklight marker and they drew a circle or an X or something on a sheet. So they said, okay, if this sheet gets washed or if they change the sheet, then this will go away. And then they came in the next day as a different person or something, and they blacklit it, and it was the same sheet. So the conclusion was that hotel doesn't change the sheets; they just remake them.
You think so? That seems silly.
Listen, man, I'm just telling you what this reporter said.
All right, let's keep going. We got questions, or is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, that's it. We're good.
Questions.
First one is, I'm highly skilled and do a good job at my company, but unfortunately, I have to work with people that are very mediocre and envious. I'm friendly to everyone, but do not share any private details about my life, nor do I care about my workmates' private life. Workmates often seem to hate you when you are good and try to discredit you behind your back. How would you proceed in such a situation?
So, honestly, I don't know, because I will say some of the words in this made me think that you might be coming off and may truly be feeling superior to them in a way that is perhaps unwarranted. So the parts that made me think that, and these could also be true things.
I was going to say, why do you think that it's unwarranted?
It might be warranted. You know what I mean? It totally might be, but I'm just going to say so because I'm not there. I don't know, but that that they're mediocre and that you're disinterested in them in their lives. Now, there's a circumstance that you could throw me into where I would feel entirely justified saying both of those things. Be like, everyone's mediocre and I don't care. I guess I feel like we might have a larger problem here, which I just want to call attention to, which is if you don't care about any of your coworkers and you think they're all mediocre, I think you should be looking elsewhere, number one. Now, I'll come back to your question, but it's like, yeah, if you're surrounded by people that you think aren't pushing you, kind of suck, and you're just disinterested in them as humans, maybe you can get a promotion or a different job or a different industry.
Go work at Google X, where you're surrounded by geniuses that have sold multi-million-dollar businesses to Google and then gone and been part of their moonshot program. I promise you won't think that they're mediocre and uninteresting.
Let's Gordian knot this problem first, which is this probably isn't right for you. If you're the smartest guy in the room all the time,
and if you do go to Google X and you find all your coworkers mediocre, it's time to look deep inside.
So that said, let's come back to the question, which is, can you read the question again, Justin? The last piece.
Yep. I'm friendly to everyone, but do not share any private details about my life, nor do I care about my workmates' private life. Workmates often seem to hate you when you are good and try to discredit you behind your back. How would you proceed in such a situation?
Well, one thing, and these are just things to try, because my experience in the workplace is limited. Yours is you probably have 5 times as much as I do. Well, I'll let you go first, so I don't preempt you. I was never that good that I needed to be shut down.
I don't remember this being. I feel like there's 2 different, from my experience, which is going to be not the same as everyone else's. In investment banking and in private equity, there were 2 mental categories. Are you likable and are you good? And people had no problem separating the 2. Mm-hmm. Who got promoted was the person that was likable and good, but no one would deny that the abrasive person was talented or that the untalented person was likable. Yeah. So I've never encountered this thing where, now what they might do is go to a boss and talk shit on the person for being dislikable. But I don't know how one could, unless it's your boss doing it, I don't know how someone could make your work product seem worse than it is.
Yeah.
Unless it's your boss
maybe not
hiding your talents to your boss's boss.
So I think I was not the good consultant. There was a good consultant, and I liked him. He helped me. He
built you scripts, right?
He built macros for me that helped me do my job way faster. So I guess I don't know that your workplace is going to go like this. I was only in a workplace for a year and a half. So this is my experience as the guy who wasn't on top, but had no ill will towards the guys who were better than me, except one who was kind of a dick. For me, it came down to personality.
Yeah.
It was
we had a talented.
One guy acted superior and injected judgment into much of what he said, and thought that he was, and made it evident, hot shit. There were other guys that were just as good as him, but were friendly, offered to help me, and didn't have an air of judgment when they spoke about things.
That's my experience as well.
And I can only speak for myself. I really liked those 2 guys, tried to work with them, talked them up when possible, and they did the same for me. It was like I was like, he did so good here. So he was like, actually, he helped me think about it. Like he described what we needed to be built, and then I built it.
Yeah.
But there was a flowing of credit. So I don't want to speak out of turn because I have such limited experience here, but I guess I would go to I wonder, one of the hypotheses is that sense of superiority and complete disinterest in them as a human. As long as you feel that, it's probably going to come through, and they're probably not going to like you. And I don't think it's because you're excellent.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's because you don't think highly of them. And the answer is, well, can you change your perspective to be more interested in them, think more highly of them, or do you need to go elsewhere? Because if you're gonna, if you're in a situation where you don't respect the people around you and you're cordially pleasant, of course you're not gonna have a good relationship, and they're not gonna like you. And we can attribute that to you being good, but you don't like them. It kind of sounds like, and whichever came first, the chicken or the egg, that is where that relationship will stay. if you'd like it to change, you're going to have to be the one that moves first. And that means moves out or shifts internally.
No, and you raise an interesting point, which is that you don't have to dislike people because they're not as good as you. I mean, Elon Musk I did a video on him. People are trying to credit him for everything that his company's doing. He's constantly going, I have an amazing team at SpaceX. They've done so much. Me getting the credit for it just because I'm the face is a complete disservice to them.
Andrew Carnegie, allegedly, that was his big thing, is that he, and again, these guys, I think often, whether it's true or not, they distribute appreciation potentially wider than it need be. And I think that's probably a good thing to do if you're
one of the presidents did that too, right?
Which president was that?
The general?
There's a lot of generals. Washington, Grant.
I thought there was someone, maybe he's the guy
Jackson.
who authorized D-Day. But he said, if this goes poorly, I will take the blame. And if it goes well, we'll credit the soldiers.
Eisenhower was the general. Yes, Eisenhower was the general for D-Day. Yeah. Eisenhower was like, it's all my fault if it goes bad, and it's all them if it goes well.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess my point is, that didn't cost him esteem in other people's eyes.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost Elon Musk esteem in other people's eyes. This willingness to say that other people are actually, in fact, talented doesn't hurt them the way that one might think that they have to scrap for every bit of the credit.
And this may not be relevant to you because you might feel like, and here's the thing, like your worldview might be that they're not contributing. So what might be worth just testing is like, give them a bit more credit than they deserve. And at first that might feel uncomfortable, but I'm actually, if this feels like I'm asking you to lie, I really am not. I'm asking you to try on a different perspective where you might be missing something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not lie and tell them that they're more. It's like really see if you can like purposely look for what you're missing in them. And you might come back and be like, dude, I tried.
Yeah, if they're all inept and awful in every way, then go to a different company.
Then leave.
But no, I have the same thought. There were two guys at one of the companies I was at. Both were going to get promoted because they were both talented. Their personality differences weren't going to cost either of them. But one of them was much more beloved by the people above, below, and his peers. And it's because he was really talented, but very nice, kind to people, and the team got the credit. He, in his mind, the team accomplished stuff. And another guy was just very confident that he was excellent, which he was. And you knew it in the tone he used and how he described things and the pronouns he used, whatever it might be. And
not the pronouns, but go ahead.
Well, I versus we.
Oh, I gotcha. I thought you meant like he versus she.
No. I versus we.
I'm sorry, 2021.
And so I imagine that he, at some points, I actually feel confident that he would go home and talk to the people around him and say, I don't understand why the people I work with don't like me. I'm so good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because he wasn't good. It's because he was kind of a dick.
Yeah. All right, let's continue.
Next is, how would you guys define confidence and self-esteem? I always aspired to have a Robert Downey Jr. type of confidence, but while reading The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, I started to put this belief into perspective. I understand that on Charisma University, the module Confidence has the goal of improving one's social skills, but within oneself, what is the best way to feel confident and self-assured, and is it even desirable? How do you define your confidence without it developing into entitlement?
So I haven't read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Have you?
No, I tried to listen to the audiobook, but just didn't end up making my way through it.
I suspect we could be splitting hairs over semantics here. You know what I mean? Like, I think, and this is the thing that good authors will do, is that they'll take something that is a weirdly defined word like love or self-esteem or confidence, or that means a lot of different things to a lot of people, and take issue with a particular definition of it so as to draw a line. But Mark and we probably largely agree on this point. So I'll try to elaborate it. When I think of confidence, and maybe this is, it's the belief that what you are doing, not just, well, in part, will go well, and that if it doesn't, you will be okay.
Yeah.
Both of those contribute to it. And so I think that what Mark might be highlighting is just the belief that things are going to go well, and which can make you arrogant and brash headed, and you're gonna do well. But also he probably defines it, and this is just me guessing based on your question, as a closed offness to new information or ways of adjusting, which in some ways I agree. I think that is, and you look at like someone like Conor McGregor, confidence when taken to the absolute extreme can look like that. Self-esteem is your reputation with yourself. It is, do you trust yourself? When you say that you are going to do something, do you have a deep-seated belief that it's done, that you are going to do it, or at least make the attempt to do it? Do you trust yourself to be a good person? Do you trust yourself to live up to your principles? Do you keep your commitments? All of those kinds of things. And what I would say is that self-esteem is here, confidence is here, and probably at the bottom is self-love, which is just like total acceptance.
For people who are just listening to this.
Sorry, bottom of the pyramid, self-love. Middle level, self-esteem. Tip of the pyramid, confidence. And what's cool is you can work on this either from top down, bottom up, or at the same time.
Unlike a real pyramid, you actually can start with confidence and then get to self-esteem and then get to self-love.
In fact, that's often what people do is they're most interested in like, I want to be confident. Let me get a six-pack. It's like, and that's going to make me believe that this interaction is going to go well.
I think the easiest order is self-esteem, confidence, self-love.
You lifted weights first, dude.
Yeah.
This is what people do is they do the loop. They start at the top, they go down. Most people do is they lift weights and they get assurances that situations will go well. And then after they do that for a while, then they're like, wait a second, I want to work on my character. Like I want to become a person who does what he says and believes and can handle rejection. And then at the bottom is self-love, which is like, I accept myself even though I know I can't handle rejection. It's like, I accept myself even though I lie. I accept myself even though I do things that cut at my own self-esteem, which is like this weird paradoxical thing. So I don't know what the fundamental question was, but yes, confidence can go awry. I think it's still worth working on and developing. It's also just a nice to have. It's like highly associated, at least my definition of it, with positive feeling, which is fun.
Yeah. And external success.
Yeah, and external success. So am I dancing around the question? Was there a...
I feel like you got it. It's just, what were your definitions?
Yeah, it's just, and then the final bit is, how do you define your confidence without it developing into entitlement?
So I guess...
Why would it?
Yeah, confidence... I guess what I can see is someone who's like just the belief that... take any of these fighters who think they're the greatest fighter on the planet and they don't work for the fight and then they get knocked out.
Well, the example the guy gave was Robert Downey Jr., so I guess that more clearly skirts the line between like being arrogant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, interesting thing about Robert Downey Jr., because I had this impression as well because of his interviews and because of Tony Stark, that he is this, cocksure, confident, arrogant guy, and he'll make jokes at other people's expense in interviews. But what you don't see is apparently he's incredibly kind. When they all get together on Avengers, he takes the lead on making sure everyone is comfortable in their role and within the group and feels included, such that when he's doing an interview with Chris Evans and takes a jab at Chris Evans, and you're like, oh man, like he's got such confidence, he's willing to make that joke right at his face. He has a backlog of months of being super kind to Chris Evans, such that when you ask Chris about him in an interview, he gushes about him. Mm-hmm. So I think people are missing that ingredient of RDJ. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, he's this, he puts on this front of, and maybe is incredibly confident, and he's very quick-witted, and he's very charismatic, but also he's super kind and thoughtful to people and treats them well. Mm-hmm. So when he makes a quip, it doesn't matter to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think he's actually entitled, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, your entitlement need not rise with your confidence at all, I think. Taking the other example of the fighter, like it depends what you're confident in. If you're confident in that even if you don't work, everything's going to turn out the way that you want, okay, that's going to be a problem. But if you're confident that if you put in the effort and if you treat people well and if you live ethically, things will tend to be okay.
Sure.
It's like, what do you place your confidence in?
You could be confident in your ability to outwork someone.
Yes.
And then you're going to have intense training camps all the time. You'll be well prepared even for your 5th title defense.
And ultimately with confidence, like at the bottom of that thing is like, you do need to be confident enough to handle failure. Like, because that's the other thing is like, I can outwork them. Well, maybe you meet someone that you can't outwork. Mm-hmm. And then it's, all right, can I handle the fact that I just bumped up against the wall that I was unable to go through? So yeah, I think that's good.
Last one is the Matt Pat one. I have a question regarding some inconsistencies I noticed in Charlie's comments through some of the podcasts.
Hypocrite.
There is one side where you are very anti-capitalistic and don't want to do things to maximize profits, but on the other hand, while I was watching the latest podcast, you were very keen on understanding how MatPat is able to get so many views and how to emulate his thinking to maximize your views as well. I'm wondering if you notice this dichotomy in your own thinking and if it creates dissonance, since it seems like you talk about how you don't like doing things to grow monetarily, but at the same time talk a lot about wanting to learn skills to be able to grow monetarily. Not attacking it all, I feel like I deal with the same dissonance in my head.
Yep. So I think there's a number of pieces of this. The first is that I do one of the interesting things is that cognitively, if I could flip the switch in myself, I would, because I have enough when I'm fully conscious, I have enough experience of earning money to know that it doesn't contribute to happiness at beyond a certain level. So I would like to shut that off, but we live in a society, you know what I mean? Like, and I do feel that there are almost inescapable influences pulling me in the other direction. And so partially what I'm doing on the podcast is like reinforcing for myself and hopefully being a reinforcer for you, just that leans slightly in that other direction. Because any music that you listen to, I mean, Christ, I haven't listened to music in a long time, but I remember the song when we were going to clubs was I woke up in a new Bugatti, and it was just, like, what do I got? What can I spend money on? All those sorts of things. So I'm just trying to almost play the Jiminy Cricket that I want more active in my life, which is this doesn't matter, even though I do feel that pull. The other thing is that there's a degree to which it's a game. Like, I play League of Legends and I know it doesn't matter, but I care. And I play Dungeons and Dragons and I know it doesn't matter, but I care. And I play YouTube and I know the results don't matter, but I care. And I like problem solving and trying to make the chart go up or whatever it is. So I think those two elements are what drives it for me. It's the game and it's the fact that I'm not enlightened yet. I still have that urge.
Good answer.
It's the last question I had.
All right.
Cool.
Patreon?
Yep.
If you guys want to hop into Patreon, we love you. We need you. We're a little bit shy this month.
Uh-oh, Justin.
No, we got you. But we are a little bit beneath our goal, so everybody who joins Patreon is a huge help to keeping this podcast going. So hopefully you guys join there and you can see another Lord knows how long of questions. Either way, we appreciate you guys. Peace.